In most UFO-related incidents, there tend to be a few recurring characteristics, only a handful of witnesses, virtually no physical evidence, phenomena that occur under the cover of night, and descriptions of the objects that are vague, elusive, and hard to verify. These situations, while intriguing, are often easily dismissed or doubted due to the lack of tangible proof. But in 1994, a strange event in southern Africa would upend all those familiar patterns. At a small primary school in the town of Ruwa, Zimbabwe, more than 60 children, ranging in age from 6 to 12, claimed that they had witnessed an unidentified flying object land just beyond the school playground. What's more, several of them stated that they had seen strange beings emerge from the craft. What made this case especially unique was that it didn't take place under the cover of darkness, but in broad daylight, around 10 o'clock in the morning, under the blazing sun, and in full view of dozens of young, watchful eyes. This remains one of the rarest reported cases of close contact with beings from beyond our world. An event that, even 3 decades later, continues to challenge researchers, psychologists, and skeptics alike with a single, haunting question: what really happened that day? Today, we'll take a closer look at the incident that shook a quiet school in Zimbabwe. But first, you'll have incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. Nestled in the peaceful outskirts of Ruwa, a rural area less than 30 kilometers from Zimbabwe's capital city, Harare, the Ariel School, a small private elementary institution, seemed entirely unremarkable. It catered to the children of relatively affluent families in the region, both white and black, with students ranging from 6 to 12 years old. Every day, these children came to class to learn, to play, and to grow up in what appeared to be a safe and secluded school environment, detached from the noise and turmoil of the world outside. But on the morning of September 16th, 1994, something wholly unexpected shattered the calm of their ordinary lives. It was around 10 o'clock in the morning. The sky was a clear, uninterrupted blue. While the teachers were gathered inside the main building for a meeting, more than 60 students were out on the playground, which was bordered by open grassy fields, scattered trees, and separated from the nearby forest by a low iron fence. It was in that very moment that a strange disc-shaped object, gleaming with a metallic silver sheen, suddenly appeared in the sky. It drifted silently above the treetops before descending into a clearing within the woods, just a few dozen meters beyond the schoolyard. Unlike the hazy, ambiguous shapes so often reported in UFO sightings, this object was clearly visible in the bright daylight, glowing faintly as if charged with some inner energy. And when the children rushed toward the fence, trying to peer between its bars, something even more extraordinary occurred. Atop the landed craft, and on the ground nearby, appeared 2 small beings. According to the students' later descriptions, these entities were slight and thin, wearing tight-fitting black suits that covered their entire bodies. Their skin was ashen gray, their faces narrow, and most striking of all were their eyes, large, dark, and impossibly wide, as if holding within them something that defied comprehension. One of the beings remained on top of the craft, observing from above. The other began to move toward the children, but not in any human way. The students later recalled that its feet never quite touched the ground. Instead, its body bounced gently with each motion, eerily reminiscent of the way astronauts hop across the surface of the moon. Immediately after witnessing the strange being approaching them, the students at Ariel School were thrown into a state of panic. Screams erupted across the playground. Some of the children stood frozen in place, paralyzed by fear, while others turned and bolted toward the school building, their faces stricken with alarm. Adjacent to the schoolyard was a small tuck shop where a woman named Mrs. Malanga was busy organizing goods. Hearing the cries and seeing the panicked children rush past, she was immediately alerted. At first, however, she suspected the children were simply playing a prank. After all, there had been previous incidents where students had feigned emergencies to distract adults and steal sweets or snacks. But something about this moment felt different. Dozens of children, all in a genuine state of distress, wore expressions of sheer terror, so shaken they could barely form coherent words. The chaos quickly spilled over into the main school building, where the teachers were in the middle of a meeting. The sound of a door bursting open, hurried footsteps, and stifled sobs brought the gathering to an abrupt halt. The teachers and even the headmaster were stunned by the sight of their students in such an unprecedented state of agitation. There was a spaceship! Someone strange came out of it! Those were the urgent cries repeated by several students. Although no one yet understood what had transpired, the headmaster tried to remain calm. He instructed the students to sit down and recount the events from the beginning. After hearing their account, he immediately dispatched 2 teachers along with a small group of students to the area where the sighting had occurred to investigate. But by the time they arrived, everything had returned to normal. The grass remained untouched. There were no scorch marks, no visible evidence that anything had landed or passed through. The teachers exchanged skeptical glances, then turned to the students who were still pointing emphatically and insisting, "It was right there, just moments ago." Some of the staff began to consider whether the children had imagined it all together, or perhaps had conspired to stage a grand game. The next day, the atmosphere at Ariel School no longer echoed with the innocent laughter of children or the familiar ringing of the school bell. Instead, the headmaster's office was inundated with a stream of phone calls. Calls that made the faculty begin to realize that what had happened the day before was far more than a mere prank by the students. Parents expressed deep concern. Many shared that on the night following the incident, their children were unable to sleep, frequently jolting awake from nightmares, their bodies drenched in cold sweat and trembling with fear. Faced with such widespread and consistent psychological reactions, the school administration could no longer remain silent. The event now had to be acknowledged with greater seriousness. They began to collect first-hand accounts from the students who had been on the playground that day, while also reaching out to experts for psychological support. Local media outlets quickly caught wind of the strange story, and soon reporters from nearby newspapers and TV stations descended on Ariel School. They were eager to cover what was being dubbed the broad daylight UFO incident that was spreading like wildfire across the region. Suddenly, the children found themselves at the center of a growing media storm. But the intense attention only served to further destabilize many of them. When asked about what they had seen, some students became visibly confused. A few were no longer able to articulate their experiences clearly, while others simply shook their heads, their eyes reddened as if they had just been crying. The fear, it seemed, had embedded itself in their young minds like a hazy, unshakable memory. In the realm of psychology, such reactions are far from unusual. When children undergo a deeply unsettling experience, one that is neither acknowledged nor addressed by the adults around them, the fear doesn't dissipate. It lingers. It sinks deeper, settling into the psyche as a kind of unresolved emotional trauma. Ariel School, once a tranquil learning environment, had suddenly become the scene of an incident that spiraled far beyond the control of teachers, parents, or society itself. Amid the chaos of skepticism and fear, Ariel School made the decision to bring in one of the world's foremost experts in child psychology for intervention. The person chosen was none other than Professor John E. Mack, a distinguished psychiatrist and faculty member at the prestigious Harvard Medical School. But what truly set him apart was not merely his academic credentials. It was his unique expertise in the study of alleged encounters between humans and extraterrestrial beings. At that time, John Mack was far from an obscure figure in the American academic and media landscape. He had previously caused a stir when he publicly stated that a significant number of ordinary, educated, and mentally stable individuals had reported experiences of alien abduction or close contact with non-human entities. He did not claim these phenomena to be objectively real in the physical sense, but he insisted that the psychological experiences of the witnesses were real to them, and thus worthy of serious and respectful investigation. 2 months after the incident, Mack boarded a plane to the town of Ruwa and made his way directly to Ariel School to meet the students involved. He did not rush to interrogate them or lead them with suggestive questions. Instead, he created a safe and gentle environment, one in which the children felt heard without being judged. One of the key methods he employed was to ask each child to draw what they had seen that day, relying solely on their own memory and perception. What happened next sent chills through both Mack and the adults observing. Though the drawings varied in small details, they displayed an uncanny consistency in structure and core content. Nearly all of them depicted an elliptical or disc-shaped flying object. Beside it stood 1 or 2 humanoid beings, small in stature dressed in tight-fitting black suits with disproportionately large black eyes that seemed to occupy nearly half of their faces. Some children illustrated the being as if it were moving in small leaps, never quite touching the ground. Others emphasized that its eyes glowed. This uniform emphasis on the eyes became a particularly haunting detail, repeated again and again across multiple drawings. Some illustrations even included detailed depictions of the craft itself, windows, lights emanating from the hull, and landing gear-like structures. Professor Mack did not rush to any conclusions, but he emphasized one central point. Whether you believe in UFOs or not, the psychological experience of these children is real, and that is something we cannot afford to ignore. For him, the variation in minor details did not undermine the authenticity of their collective memory, but rather reflected the natural differences in perception and recall among individual children, an essential principle in cognitive science. From what he gathered at Ariel, John Mack did not merely document a strange episode in the annals of UFO history. He also posed a profound and unsettling question to the scientific world. Are we truly prepared to accept that there may be experiences that fall outside the boundaries of our current human understanding? Some were quick to propose the theory that this was not an actual encounter with extraterrestrial beings, but rather a case of mass hysteria, a psychological phenomenon often observed in closed environments such as churches, schools, or summer camps. According to this hypothesis, all it takes is one highly imaginative individual to spark a story, and fear spreads like a domino effect, causing others to believe they've seen something unusual too. Historically, such incidents have been documented. However, Professor John Mack, speaking from his expertise as a developmental psychologist and a specialist in trauma, resulting from close encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena, firmly rejected that explanation. In his view, the mass psychosis theory was overly simplistic and failed to account for several critical aspects of the event. He argued that if this had merely been a contagious delusion, the children would have described identical images and details, as though all were repeating a single rumor. But in reality, each child independently drew and recounted their experience with subtle yet significant variations. Differences in the shape of windows, the quality of the light, the number of beings, or the configuration of the craft. Even more compelling was the fact that these accounts were gathered before the media became involved, before any external influence could have distorted the collective memory. Mack conducted his interviews individually, with each child entering the room alone, free from the presence of peers or adults, and asked only to draw what they had seen. Under such conditions, if it had all stemmed from shared imagination, the drawings would have diverged so drastically that no cohesive pattern could emerge. Instead, they aligned in uncanny ways on the most essential points. And perhaps most important of all, no child can fake the kind of genuine fear that was observed. Physical symptoms such as night sweats, sleepwalking, stammering during conversation, or sitting silently for hours with a distant gaze are hallmarks of psychological trauma, nearly impossible to fabricate, especially in children between the ages of 6 and 12. Mack also pointed out that true mass hysteria events typically fade once the claims are debunked or disproved, but in the case of the Ariel School students, the fear never faded. In fact, many of them, now adults, have continued to assert that what they experienced that day was real. The stark divide between media skepticism and professional psychological analysis turned the Zimbabwe incident into one of the most hotly debated UFO cases in modern history. Not only because the number of eyewitnesses exceeded 60 schoolchildren, but because psychology, the press, and mainstream science could not seem to speak the same language. From September 16, 1994 to this very day, the strange encounter at Ariel Primary School in Ruwa, Zimbabwe remains an unsolved mystery. Though 3 decades have passed and science has made enormous leaps, this event still sits beyond the reach of conventional explanation. Many of those children, now grown, still affirm the truth of what they saw. A few have even appeared on television or at international conferences to retell their experience, with calm yet emotionally resonant voices, as if they're still trying to understand the extraordinary thing that once unfolded before their eyes. And perhaps what makes the Ariel School UFO incident so remarkable is not the image of the spacecraft or the strange beings, but the raw sincerity in the eyes of the children, the fear that cannot be staged, and the unwavering belief that has never been extinguished. If today's story made you pause, even for a moment, to reflect on what might exist beyond the limits of human understanding, don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Thank you for watching until the very end. See you on the next journey.